What are some ridiculous punishments your parents gave you as a kid? My mom would give my brother and I writing assignments with the topics dependent on what we did to make her angry. I lost TV and the ability to see my friends all summer long because I couldn't predict when I was getting my first period, and my mom was highly inconvenienced at having to buy me maxi pads. My mom was punitive and a psycho control freak. I was punished for anything and everything or nothing at all, and it backfired big time. Thing is, when you can't be beaten worse than you have short of death and have nothing left to lose, you're free. One day I realized I was damned if I do damned if I don't, so I may as well do what I want, which resulted in her kicking me out at 15. She thought this would scare me into submission and told me I'd be back in a week. Nope. I was already working overtime hours, bought my own car and cell phone, paid my bills, bought my own groceries and necessities, and the reason I was working so much is because I factored in rent and utilities to prepare for living on my own. A couple months went by and she came threatening, begging, and bargaining for me to move back. I told her to go to hell and that I never wanted to see her again. We've been estranged for almost 20 years. I grew up during the 70s and early 80s. I was a free-range kid, practically feral. That was really common then. I never was hit, rarely yelled at. My mum laughingly called it benign neglect. But when I turned 16, they got sober and learned about tough love. In my family, there are all kinds of acceptable hobbies, but the one big no-no is theater. You just don't do theater. And, of course, I did theater. Once they were paying attention, they threatened to kick me out if I didn't stop associating with those people. I called their bluff, but it wasn't a bluff. So my punishment for being in theater was to be homeless at 16. In the 3rd grade, my friend Jeffrey's dad submerged his hand in a pot of boiling water and held it there because he thought Jeffrey had stolen a pencil while at school. He thought Jeffrey was lying about finding the pencil on the playground, but he really wasn't. Jeffrey came to school with his right hand all wrapped up in thick gauze bandages to cover the blister. Curious me had to ask what happened. I was only 8 at the time, but it blew my mind that someone's father could be so terribly cruel. This was back in the day when parents could abuse the living shit out of their kids and still not get arrested. My parents would make me count money when I was bad. Jokes on them. I love counting money. My dad made me weed the garden naked for spilling spaghettios on my shirt. Since I uselessly got hit with an extension cord, this was mild and welcome. I'm glad I was born, but it's clear some people weren't meant to be parents. My dad left me shut in a hot car because I didn't want to play with my new stepsisters. He drove me out to their house, but I didn't want to play with them. I didn't want to be there. I stayed in the car with the door open because it was hot. He shut the door, said it was bad for the battery to leave it open. I asked him to turn the car on for a second and roll down the window. He said no. So I stayed there. It got hot and stuffy. I couldn't breathe much. I knew if I gave in that it would set a precedent, and he'd know that any time he wanted me to do something he could just deprive me of oxygen and get his way. So I waited. Eventually he opened the door and physically dragged me out of the car and threw me on the ground in his new wife's garden. I stayed there crying for the rest of the visit. Beauty bark is splintery as hell. I was punished for things I didn't do and nobody would believe me. Got my hands whipped. Was forced to kneel on the brick fireplace mantel on my knees until I admitted guilt or apologized. I never did and fell asleep at the fireplace because I'm not admitting fault when I did nothing. When I grew up, being accused without proof has become one of my anger buttons. It's even worse if I try to explain and the accuser persists without listening. My mom would make me take a spoonful of the super spicy mustard, but she would let me choose how much, and so the first time it happened I chose a little bit, obviously. Then she took my spoon and scooped up some more. The next time it happened, knowing she'd go and scoop up more if she thought it wasn't enough, I had decided to take similar to what she had given me the previous time. So I took my spoonful and she looks at me and says, "Wow, that's a lot." I have a great relationship with my mom, but goddammit, don't use psychological warfare on a 6-year-old. I was supposed to dress nice for school one day and forgot to, so when I came home my grandma, who raised me, made me put on an ugly sweatshirt. For some reason, she thought this was a perfectly reasonable punishment. Made me eat raw chili for telling a lie, then proceeded to lie to me about the modem breaking to get me off the internet. Made me kneel on the jagged edges of bottle caps in front of the family altar because I embarrassed her. Caning, Lots of caning. On the palms, 1 stroke for each mark away from 90/100. On the legs for crossing the road without looking out for traffic. Was made to go to school with those cane marks as an added embarrassment for me. On the arms, because my grandfather complained to her that I misbehaved. She did it during a house party in order to send a message to everyone that she had disciplined me. Made me bleed from repeated slapping because I failed to meet her expectations, and many more. I grew up angry and aloof. I failed horribly at social interactions. Fortunately, I found the love of my life. I moved away and distanced myself. I am happily married and want to let this die with me. I won't ever raise a hand on anyone. Go pick our own switch off a tree. We immediately learned the thinner branches did not hurt less just because they were smaller. Making you pick your own tool of punishment is some psychological warfare lol. My dad found out I was failing a couple classes on the ride home from my high school one day, so he made me get out and run around the neighborhood while he followed me in his truck. Thing is, I was an athletic football player in high school, and our coach loved making us run. After about 30 minutes of light jogging and me not being out of breath, he gave up and took us back home. We didn't talk about my grades after that, either. I think his punishment failing might have broken his spirit a little. Wasn't allowed to listen to rap music as a kid. Got caught with a rap CD, so my dad made us listen to it during dinner to prove how inappropriate it was. Not 100% sure what he was thinking, but I found it quite comical to listen to X Gonna Give It To You during dinner. I was a big reader. My mom would ground me from my book. Usually it was because I wasn't cleaning my room or doing X chore. Clean bathrooms or scrub floor. My mom is a clean freak. If I was not doing the chore, she would take my book. This did not work. I would have a decoy book set on my bed or nightstand, and my real in progress book was in my backpack or something. I'm a parent now. I'm kinda impressed with myself as a kid, and if my kids did that, I think I would rethink my punishments. After sending me to my room stopped being a punishment because I liked it in there, they started taking away my ghetto blaster boombox. That was tragic. For bad words, my mother used mustard on my tongue. It was spicy Dijon. To this day I still hate mustard. The most ridiculous of all wasn't really a punishment, but it still really got to me and was absurd. My mom had kicked me out, the first time, and I was living with my dad. Several months later my sister got in trouble, so my mom called me and yelled at me about how it was somehow my fault. I didn't even live with her, and yet she was still trying to punish me, and trying to punish me for something that someone else did. Took the door of my bedroom, so my brothers could come in anytime and drive me crazy. Out of all the punishment, this was the worst. For your information, hitting your kids is ducked up and accomplishes nothing but teach them it's okay to hit loved ones out of anger. My mom's best idea of a punishment was to take me to the hair salon and get my eyebrows waxed. I'm hairy AF. Turns out, I got the autism. Hair salons, barbershops are still a big no from me. Dog. Once I was shut in my room until I would apologize to my brother for calling him a name, but every 5 minutes, Dad placed another potato in the room. It got up to 426 potatoes. I don't know where they all came from. The nearest grocery store was like 20 minutes away. Another time he made me draw portrait after portrait of Ben Franklin until I would agree not to shave the cat again. And when I first got my driver's license and got a speeding ticket, he made me get a tattoo of Murphy Brown. Failed a couple classes in high school. Parents took door off the hinges. Removed all furniture from bedroom except the mattress and box spring. Took all of my clothes, except collared shirts and khaki pants. I wore mostly basketball shorts and band tees, and shaved my head. I had grown my hair out for almost a year at that point and had become pretty attached to it. Yes, all of that was for failing 2 classes on 1 report card, not even having to repeat the classes.